on the lunatics on the left. They mock him.
I just think you're dumb.
Hillary's book blamed him.
A prominent Trump supporter, Aubrey Shines, produced an online video attacking me.
John Oliver mocks him, calls him a nut job from Tampa. Trump thanked him. So he continues to shine the light.
We can do better, we will do better, but we'll only make it happen if you are informed. That's what we're here to do.
America shines when you're connected to Aubrey Shines. Here's your host, Aubrey Shines.
Well, we have a very packed day today. This is going to help so many of you understand the real dilemma that we find ourselves in. We're talking about one thing in particular, not just with my first guest, but several guests that are going to follow here in just a moment. And that is, what is really globalism? And why should every American really be concerned about it? I want you to consider something here before I even introduce my guest dealing with this subject matter. Have you ever just noticed how the same government encroachments are taking place in America, but they're also happening around the globe? Just look at Europe, Canada, Australia, and New Zealand, for example. All over the world, citizens, individual liberties, and freedoms are being lost to men and women that are in authority, making sure that you and I have none. The parallels are too similar and widespread to be a coincidence. So how do you explain it? What exactly is going on and why? The culprit is simple. It's globalism. Let's jump right into today's program because we have great guests with us today. Michelle Bachmann, who is currently the Dean of the Robertson School of Government at Regent University. Michelle, thank you so much for taking part of your day to be with us. We're going to be showing this, by the way, Michelle, to a group of ecumenical leaders that I'm tied to, some that are also, they're big fans of yours. Let me just say that. I know that your university just lost someone who I considered very dear, and that is Pat Robertson. The great work that he did in Virginia and globally, I think is incalculable. I really, really do. Michelle, why should every American, since we're dealing here with this issue of globalism, why should we be concerned?
Well, Aubrey, thank you for having me on your show today. This effort toward globalism and a move away from nationalism, in other words, our own country that we're moving in. So nationalism would be we're concerned about our own country and the welfare of the people in our country. Globalism is a move toward global governance where decisions are made for everyone on Earth from one centralized force. That's not very practical. It doesn't work very well because most problems are local. Most problems aren't on a global scale. But that's the movement that we're going down. At Regent University, we saw this rise of authoritarianism this last year across the world at an unprecedented pace. This move toward global government, one world government, if you will. If you talked about this even 3 years ago, people would accuse you of being crazy, of wearing a tinfoil hat. But now the evidence is everywhere, and there is this rise of globalism. And so when you diminish local authority and national authority, so that in our system of government, for instance, in America, the people are supposed to be able to choose. We're supposed to be able to choose the people who lead us, who are the decision makers, and we're able to weigh in on the issues that are current and that will govern us. When we lose that ability to vote for people and to vote on the issues that we believe in, then we've lost freedom and we've lost liberty. And instead, when it is one decision maker on a global level, that means we have one person making a decision that will impact literally 8 billion people on Earth. That's never going to work. And we hear it talked about in the Bible. It's predicted in the Bible that one day there will be a one world government. And so for those who are familiar with the Bible, who have read the Bible, they see this rise of authoritarianism and this conversion of events that are happening all at the same time that lead people to wonder, are we in a particular period of time when we are seeing this rise of global government that was predicted? And it looks like a lot of the signs are lining up. And that's why I think it's even more important that we're paying attention to the signs of the times. And you put up a placard on this conference that we held on globalism. Anyone can watch it. It's free of charge. It's a series of experts that we pulled together. It's a fascinating, really spellbinding piece of work. And I commend everyone to watch this seminar. It isn't that long, but it speaks to what's happening now in our world. People can access at regent.edu/globalism. So Regent is regent.edu/globalism. Regent.edu/globalism. It's on demand. You can watch it anytime for free, and it'll be very illuminating. We have experts speaking on this topic, and you are seeing all of this, everything that they talked about, that they predicted, it's playing out right now. This is a very contemporary conference, and it's maybe 4 hours long.
Yeah, well, no, it's worth the watch. And Michelle, I want to get into it in the next segment as well. I know that you were at the World Economic Forum, and I pay a lot of attention to it. I've had some friends to go over. I was just addressing a council, as a matter of fact, in the EU myself not too long ago with a couple really, really top leaders. They're very, very concerned. I don't think people, though, really understand, Michelle, how this is really going to come into fruition. Case in point, let's begin to tie in this first segment really quick. How does having a digital currency tie into those individuals like the George Soros and others that are really trying to usurp authority over all, not just Americans, overall? Yeah. Tie the digital currency, Michelle, into this scenario.
Sure. Let me just clarify. I was not attending the World Economic Forum. I was attending the World Health Organization meeting in Geneva, Switzerland in the end of May in 2023. They have an annual meeting for the World Health Assembly, and I attended because of what you just said. A government official from Indonesia said that the G20 nations, the 20 largest economies of the world, were going to be a part of meeting at the World Health Assembly in Geneva, and they were going to put into place a global digital passport where everyone on Earth would have a digital identity, and this passport would cover healthcare issues like vaccines, testing, all that sort of thing. But that would be the very first building block of what ultimately would be a digital identity and a digital permission, if you will, over all areas of life, including digital currency. So this building block happened, but it didn't happen in Geneva, Switzerland. And that I was shocked they didn't talk about this. This is what they said they were going to talk about. They said they were going to pass this. It's included in amendments to the international health rule changes and in the global pandemic treaty that they intend to pass next year in 2024. But they did something even more slippery. What they did is, after the conference was over, about maybe a week, 10 days after the conference was over, there was a press release. And the press release said that the European Commission, the tiny little executive committee of the European Union, agreed with the World Health Organization that the World Health Organization would administer the global digital passport, which again is the first building block step of enforcing global government. So global government today is operational. This is a huge statement I'm making right now. Global government is operational as of June 2023, and it's operational over the 80 nations within Europe, and it's being administered by the World Health Organization. This was all envisioned through the World Health Assembly that they were going to do it. They didn't vote on it in May. The shock, the bombshell, is that they actually just did it. They did it without a vote. And so we all thought it was going to take another year, but they actually just did it in June.
Well, we're going to do this, Michelle. Michelle Bachmann is the dean of the Robertson Government there. Great university, by the way. I've had some friends that are actually alums that are there. We're going to come right back. I got to get a little deeper into this. I think this particular subject is something every American should really be paying attention to. We're going to be right back with Michelle Bachmann.
Once again, shouting the battle cry of freedom.
Probably one of my favorite songs there. That is when our great republic, especially those GOP guys, made sure that the 13th Amendment was signed. Didn't have a lot of help from those in the Democratic Party. This is why we still rally around the flag here. We believe in the exceptionalism of the United States of America. This is why we have with us today Michelle Bachmann as well. The great work that she's doing, I think, should be echoed everywhere. We'll make sure that all of her sites are put up everywhere. We want to dig in. Michelle, I want to get right back to this here because, again, I don't think the enormity is really being felt. Of course, we know in the legacy media, we're not hearing any of this at all, and why everyone should be concerned about it. We're tying in the digital currency, but at the same time, we also know that those that chose to take a vaccine, that they were also put within this category of this passport where certain groups have all of this information, not just on my friends there in the EU, but even here in the United States. Michelle, why should especially every American be concerned about that?
Well, people need to be concerned because this movement of a global digital passport is coming to every person on earth. You didn't ask for it. You didn't consent to it. but this is something that will be forced upon all of us. Today, as we speak, it's being forced on all the people in Europe. That's a huge amount of people. The European economy approaches the size of the American economy, and the population is also very large as well. So this is being implemented today as we speak. It is global governance, and global government is being enforced through your cell phone. So for all of the listeners, take a look at your cell phone and imagine a QR code. You've seen those funny little splotchy boxes. That's how this will be. That's how global government will be enforced. A QR code on your phone that gives you access or denies access to you. So you'll be able to travel or not be able to travel, whether you're in compliance with what the World Health Organization says you need to have. So if the World Health Organization says you need to have so many vaccines, so many boosters, so much testing, have you worn your mask, have you locked down, whatever it is that they demand, on your QR code, it will either say you're in compliance or you're not in compliance. If you're in compliance, then you'll be allowed to travel. You'll be allowed to get on a plane. Here in America, they're already starting facial recognition at the Atlanta airport. This has happened in the Minneapolis airport and various airports, and that's based upon the QR code. That, again, is the first foundational building block of this digital system. Every person on earth will be assigned a digital ID. It will be on a QR code on your phone. It first deals with healthcare. It secondly deals with the right to travel. It thirdly deals with your right to buy and sell. This has already happened in England. I've already observed a video from an Aldi's grocery store in England. A visiting businessman wanted to go in and buy food in Aldi's, and he took a video that I saw of the poster on the wall saying that you have to have the QR code on your phone to get in to be able to the store to be able to buy or sell food. And then there were barriers, digital barriers to get into the store. What does that mean? Just like a turnstile, if you were going to get into any other establishment, only it was digital. So you had to hold up your phone with your QR code, and if your QR code was good, you held it up to the barrier, you could get into Aldi's and you can buy food. So it wasn't paying at the end, it was to even just get into the store. So that's why I say this is an absolutely blockbuster bombshell story that in June of 2023, global government has been operationalized in Europe. Europe isn't backwards. Europe is first world. So this is already starting. So digital currency will be the next building block that is added to this individual digital identification, this global digital passport system that's been implemented. It was implemented in part during the pandemic, the 3 years that we all went through that. So that was beta tested in Europe. Now it is operational. And I'll be going to Europe very soon, and I'll check it out myself for how this is in the process of working. But here's the question for those of us in America. It doesn't seem like anyone in the U.S. Senate or the U.S. House of Representatives has woke up yet and understands how serious this is, that this is already operationalized. So my question for President Biden and for our Congress is, when is the United States going into this system? Because the government official in Indonesia said last November that all the G20 countries agreed to go into this global passport system. Well, the United States is in the G20. We're the largest of all the world's economies. So my question is, when is the United States going in? And why are we going in? We haven't given consent. Will the United States Congress vote on this? My practical answer is no, they're never going to vote on this. The Senate won't vote on this. The House won't vote on this. This will just be a press release in all likelihood that is issued from the Biden administration, and we'll just be in it. And at that point, our members of the Senate and the House will be hapless, and they'll be saying, what happened? What are we going to do? But we won't be able to get on a plane without this digital ID. We won't be able to access our money it'll be digital currency, and we won't be able to buy or sell without it. So this is very far down the road. People don't realize how far down the road this is. Our senators, our U.S. representatives need to wake up, because the Biden administration is all for this. They're aggressors in this area. They're very assertive in putting the United States into this. But people need to know this is global government, and the enforcement mechanism for global government is innocuous as your phone and your digital identity on your phone that restricts your right to travel and your right to buy and sell, and will turn your bank account into digital currency.
You know, Michelle, I had the opportunity during the 16 election cycle. I worked with then candidate Donald J. Trump. I see that even when we would be out, and, you know, of course, we're on the political trail at that time, and I'd listen at him time and time again, just kind of smash the globalists. Yet, I'm looking at this current administration signing executive orders to exactly what you're talking about. Michelle, it's hard for a lot of individuals to believe this, but it really does matter who we put in the Oval Office, doesn't it?
Well, it does. Donald Trump was the most anti-globalist candidate and president we've had in modern times. In our lifetimes, we've never had a candidate who had more fidelity to national sovereignty, to the United States of America. His agenda was called America First. That's not a radical philosophy. That's the same philosophy as the founders of the United States of America. Donald Trump loves America. He loves the American people, and he wanted to lift up and create greatness here in the United States and greatness for our economy. And the fact is, we had the best outcomes of our economy and our military, our domestic policy, our foreign policy. We had our best lives under Donald Trump. For the African-American male, they never had it as good as they did under Donald Trump, and for Hispanics, and for women, and for disabled, and for youth. You won't hear that in the mainstream media, but it is true. I'm not here advocating for presidency for Donald Trump. I'm just giving you objectively what our lives were like under Donald Trump. We never had it as good as we did under Donald Trump. A complete 180-degree difference with the Biden administration. The Biden administration is committed to the destruction of the United States of America. It's statistically impossible that any administration would get every decision wrong in terms of enhancing the quality of life in the American economy and American foreign policy. The Biden administration has got it wrong 100% of the time. If you look at the outcomes of the decisions that the Biden administration has made, nearly every single one has benefited the communist Chinese and advancing their agenda, not the United States agenda. So it is the Biden administration that has taken the lead at the United Nations and the World Health Organization in giving up American sovereignty. That's what the Biden administration proposed amendments to the international health rules of the World Health Organization achieve. It achieves giving up U.S. sovereignty to the United Nations healthcare arm, the World Health Organization. The same with the Global Pandemic Treaty. It gives up U.S. sovereignty to the United Nations and to their elite little groups. One group now is being called the Conference of the Parties. They would usurp the decision-making authority of all 194 nations at the UN. That leads to one world government. And so we're operationalizing now this month in Europe, and we're already there. So people have got to wake up and recognize it's very late in this process.
It is. Michelle Bachmann, Dean of Robinson School of Government. So glad that you stopped by today. We're going to put all of your info out. You're one of my personal fans there. Love, by the way, what Regent University is doing. Stay tuned. We have more on this subject. You don't want to miss it.
Thank you.
shouting the battle cry of freedom.
Joel Griffith is the economics, what I call go-to guy there at Heritage. This topic of economics and how it impacts not just us here in this country, but globally as well. And I think the work that Heritage Foundation does, you've heard me say it time and time again when we have various guests on from Heritage, I think they're the real go-to, in my opinion, and have been actually for many years. Joel, so glad that you're here. I want to dive really deep into this here because this economic impact that's happening in our country is impacting all. I really hate the hyphenation of Black American or Brown American. I just see us as American that have different ethnicities. I really believe, Joel, there's only one race. But with that being said, we're looking at a downturn here that's really impacting poor and middle class people regardless of their color. Am I onto something there, Joel?
No, you're exactly right. You know, President Biden is touting Bidenomics as if it's something to be proud of. But if you look at what has happened the past 2 years, American families and generations have never experienced a 2-year stretch as difficult as what they've seen since the beginning of the Biden presidency. If you're a typical family earning typical wages, you've seen your real take-home pay adjusted for inflation plunge by $7,000 per year. And that's before factoring in the higher interest costs and revolving debt. And that's before factoring in the sky-high housing costs if you're unfortunate enough to go ahead and try to find a mortgage in the past year and a half. This has been an incredibly difficult stretch. We saw 2 quarters last year where economic growth actually shrank, and our economy is barely crawling along right now. And even if you are employed, I said, your standard of living almost certainly has gone down the past 2 years if you're in the middle class or even if you're in the upper middle class as a small business owner.
You know, Joel, I'm glad that you bring that up because often I hear when I lecture, when I'm doing some sort of show, radio, etc., I always hear those on the opposite side say, well, wait a minute here. People are getting raises, but I don't think they really get it. Hypothetically, if the inflation rate goes up, I'm making this up, to 20%, and your employer comes in and gives you 10% raise, you're still 10% negative here. Why is there such a disconnect? And why are individuals not hearing, Joel, the things that you, your group, and others that really understand the economy, why are they not hearing about this, Joel?
Well, there's a lot of spin going on, and President Biden continues to tout this top line number where wages on average are increasing. Well, as you just pointed out, if wages are increasing, but prices are increasing faster, that's a real wage cut. And that's exactly what we've seen. This is official data coming from our government economists, and you can actually trust a lot of that data. And it shows that year over year, real wages have declined for 26 plus months now. And that is starting to add up. You know, maybe 1 year at a 2% cut doesn't sound like much, but now we're seeing this continue into the third year. And this is really starting to harm families. People are feeling it. And this shows up in some other data as well. If you look at the savings rate, we are now near an all-time low in the savings rate for American families. They're only saving a few percentage points of what they earn. And that coincides with a dramatic increase in credit card debt. We just saw all-time record highs in credit card debt, nearly $1 trillion. And what this suggests now is that American families are drawing down savings and using their credit cards not to splurge on big screen TVs or go on vacation. Families are doing this to pay the grocery bills and to pay the rent and to pay the mortgage. We are paying for the excesses that we saw during COVID with the government spending explosion, and we're paying for President Biden's grotesque mistake to actually accelerate that spending after he took office.
Joe, I have a different type of question. It's still in the framework and within the, in my opinion, within the parameter of economics. Is there an advantage to intentionally crashing our economy? Again, I may sound like a guy with a tinfoil hat on here, but I don't know. I was raised in a very strong business-oriented home, and I understand basic business. I was raised in it. Is there an attempt to crash us? If so, why?
Well, I attribute the economic mayhem right now primarily to ineptitude in our government. I think we'd be giving them too much credit to think that they would actually try to orchestrate economic calamity, because there are some political consequences that will result if this economic malaise continues. But I think it is gross ineptitude. Now, I do think you have a point that when we have economic crises, whether intentionally caused or otherwise, those on the left attempt to use that crisis to their advantage. We saw that during the pandemic, where you saw these government programs put into place to distribute money almost in the form of universal basic income, and then our central bank that put into place mechanisms to buy corporate debt, to deliver loans to businesses, and all of this concentrated power in the hands of the federal government and in the hands of the central bank. And guess what? Those programs, that infrastructure that was put into place to have even more central planning, that remains in place. The precedent has been set. And as Rahm Emanuel said years ago, let no good crises go to waste. And that's exactly what we've seen the left wing do. They've put in place a mechanism to expand government control for years, perhaps decades going forward.
Joe Griffith, research expert there at Heritage. If you had any consolation for Americans, take 15 seconds, share that. Also share where our audience can find you. Joel, go.
Well, my consolation would be that it does appear the public is beginning to wake up. If you see the concerns in the polling data raised over inflation, our Federal Reserve and government debt, a greater number of Americans are waking up, and I just hope that concerns carries through to the next election. We don't just need more Republicans in office. We need more people across the board that recognize the threat that this government debt poses to our future prosperity.
Joe, wow. Where can our audience find you, sir?
They can find me at heritage.org. Just look up my name or any topic you're interested in, or Twitter at Joel Griffith.
Joe Griffith, got to bring you back. I would ask you to really get to the point and make yourself very, very clear, but I think that you're pretty masterful at doing that. And this is why we ask you to come on, because I think our country is in a problem. I think we're in a spiral, but I think with groups like yours, information that you guys produce, I think we can really begin to turn this whole ship around. Joe Griffith, again, thank you so much for coming. We're going to come right back. I have one of my dearest friends coming on, Frank Gaffney. The body of work that this guy does, it's incredible. I just only wish at times that I had an entire show to devote to what Frank is doing. We're going to come right back with him. Stay tuned.
Once again, shouting the battle cry of freedom.
There are only a handful of individuals in this nation that I have so much respect for that I will often use them when I'm out lecturing, when I'm on a radio show, even without their, quote, permission. I believe already have it. One of those individuals is Frank Gaffney. I want to show you a photo of a book that I think every one of us should run. Frank is not just what I call one of the premier voices, the executive chair and founder of Center for the Security Policy. This book, The Indictment, is prosecuting the Chinese Communist Party and friends for crimes against America, China, and the world. I shared with Frank, as well as some of the others, that I'm soon to delve into this book. I've already seen some of the highlights of it. I can't wait to engage. But Frank, thanks so much for taking part of your day to share with our audience. This is a very serious topic. And what I'm finding when I go out, and especially when I'm doing a lot of radio, TV around the country, a lot of our legacy media are, in my opinion, Frank, intentionally trying to shut down this topic. But this topic It impacts every single American, not just my buddies over in the EU that love you, but especially here in America. Frank, why are we missing this issue here that's so vital to who we are as Americans? Frank.
Well, Aubrey, it's great to be with you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk a little bit about what's going on in that respect, but more generally. In the book, we talk about the Chinese Communist Party's crimes against America, and principally, we describe those as war crimes, because properly understood, the Chinese Communist Party is a transnational criminal organization. And those war crimes have done incalculable harm through a technique called unrestricted warfare. That is to say, before there's violent warfare, there's a whole host of ways in which they can weaken us and take us down. The single most important of which, I believe, is a practice they call elite capture. And among the elites they have captured is the American media. And so the reason that we are not hearing much from them, or for that matter, other leaders, leaders on Wall Street, leaders in the business community more generally, the Hollywood folks, the academics, and even our political leadership, most especially the President of the United States, are all part of what I call a captured elite. Not obviously everybody in all of those categories, but leaders within each of them. And the trouble with the media being captured is they're supposed to be providing an independent platform for information that the government may not find convenient to push out, or businesses or others. But the media is supposed to be providing all of the information that we need so that we can make informed judgments about what's right, what's wrong, what is important to us, what makes sense. If the Chinese are essentially dictating what is permissible to write about or talk about or produce video about, notably, Real America's Voice is an exception to all of that, of course, but too many other outlets are prey to it, partly because they're broke. You know, they need the money, and the money comes from China in the form of advertising supplements or investments or other things that essentially create a condition under which the media is not going to tell us the full story by any means, if anything unflattering to the Chinese Communist Party, let alone that they are at war with us, which is the critical thing all of us need to know.
You know, Frank, I listen to you, and I have always tried to be at least pretty astute on all of these topics. I remember being in college, having a Middle Eastern political class, and I remember combining that with some theological premises. And I'm addressing now, and I want you to address, because I don't think they really understand the magnitude of this. Frank, I had an opportunity a few weeks ago. I looked at some of the writings of some of the greatest sermons during guys that produced them during our Revolutionary War, our Civil War. They were engaged. These are ecumenical leaders that were engaged in the language. I see an absence for that and from that, unfortunately, because it was the champions. These were the trumpeters, the Martin Luther Kings, the Frederick Douglass. These were guys that come out of church and understood global issues of this magnitude. When you just espoused the fact that the CCP controlling, whether it's Disney, some of the other outlets, of course they're infiltrating our kids, our minds. These are things that are just unfortunately destroying the fabric of this country. Yet, Frank, you and I both know they don't push this false agenda in their own nation. In your opinion, Frank, why are we so blind in this nation that we're not paying attention? Take the legacy media out. I get it. They're owned. I get it. I do. I get it. But how is it, Frank, that topics of this magnitude are not resonating more in our colleges, in our high schools, even in our pulpits, which I address those issues all the time with a lot of top leaders in this nation? But in your opinion, why is there this deafening silence, Frank?
Again, I'd say it goes back to the purposeful suppression by the people who now exercise considerable control over the people that we expect would be talking about these things. Look, most of us, are busy with our lives, our businesses, our families, our communities, what have you. But we expect, particularly people that we elect to represent us, to be paying attention to things that might affect us very profoundly, like a mortal enemy in the form of the Chinese Communist Party. And if they don't look out for us, if they don't warn us of dangers, because it's inconsistent with their own personal interests. They're, as I say, under, I believe, considerable control by the Chinese Communist Party. And again, look no further than Joe Biden. This is a guy that every passing day we see more and more evidence of the extent of his personal corruption and submission to the CCP. And, we all need to do our part to get smart about these issues. We wrote the book, The Indictment, for that purpose, to try to help the average citizen who may, by the way, Aubrey, have actually had a hard wake-up call about China as a result of this pandemic, which they unleashed on us deliberately, by the way, as a biological warfare attack, a point we make in the book. But the reality is that we still are almost certainly not going to have the full picture unless people in positions of authority and leadership help inform us, and they're not doing it now. I think to a degree that is professionally malfeasant, if not actually downright criminal.
I think this is why your book is necessary. I don't think this is something that any of our audience should just kind of overlook and go, well, it doesn't matter. No, it actually does matter, because these are individuals, when they're compromised, and again, you're 100% correct, it doesn't seem like there's a day that's not gone by in the last few months here that we're not hearing of this coalition and juxtaposing Biden with this same regime. Frank, where can our audience find you? Your work is brilliant, by the way, and just in full transparency, I've known you now for years, and I can share with our audience who you see Frank Gaffney display right now. This is who this gentleman is behind closed doors as well. He's a lover of this nation, and I think every one of us should pay attention. Frank, where can our audience find you?
Well, let me just say thank you for your kind words. You're a dear friend, and I appreciate our professional as well as personal friendship. Let me just say, you can find out more about all that we do right here at Real America's Voice. We have a wonderful program, Securing America, on every day. SecuringAmerica.tv is an easy way to get access to all of its content, as is SecureFreedom.org and PresentChina.org.
Frank Gaffney. Got to bring you back. Love you. Appreciate the work you're doing. God knows we need more men and women like Frank Gaffney. We're coming right back in just a moment. Usually, I reserve this last block to kind of go over every element that the prior blocks and our guests have kind of brought forth. Even though we're dealing with the collapse of a nation, I thought this was still apropos, and that is to take a moment and to really shine the light on what I would call one of our truest heroes. He recently transitioned. I called him a friend of mine. We've had some great conversations. A dear friend, Rabbi Aryeh Spiro. I want to just say on behalf of Rabbi Aryeh and to his family, Beth, of course, and to the boy's daughter, what a tremendous treasure this man has brought to this country. I don't even would do it justice just to take just a few minutes here to talk about the impact, not just in my personal life, but the impact that Aryeh had in the lives of so many of us. Some of the things that this gentleman was able to accomplish is much bigger than most of you would even realize, because his voice was a voice, what I call a real general. I've actually had the opportunity. I interviewed him a few years ago. We were talking about some issues as it related to Israel, as it related to America, our intrinsic ties one with another, why it really mattered. A lot of the falsities that are pushed by the media, where they're always trying to have this, what I call an anti-Semitic view. But my friend, Rabbi Aryeh Spiro, he didn't tolerate it. He's very wise in the way he would do things. I've had great conversations. He would remind me, I'm going to leave a lot of this off the table, but he would remind me of who I was. He would often ask questions. I knew what he was really doing. He was probing, trying to figure out and find a way to interject a position, even though he used such stealth and diplomacy. He was very civil in the way that he would deal with issues. And I'll never forget one of the great encounters we had. We were both in Texas, and we were working on a project. I didn't know him at the point. I would get to know him because I was familiar with his work. While we're standing there in the lobby of this particular hotel, we just kind of, it just worked. It just fit. We began to talk about global issues. He said, wait a minute, I've seen you. And he shared with me what legacy media he had seen me on before interviewing. And at the time it was Fox. I'm no longer a fan of them. But with that being said, we were talking about some of the issues that really impacted America. And in that moment, our relationship was born. And it was often that Aryeh would either write me, give me a call, ask me, hey, what are you doing? Well, have you considered this? And we kind of fell away for just a moment. Nothing personal, just got really busy, only to find myself in Washington at one point in a meeting. I opened up the door. My plane had been a little late. And who was sitting in there? Rabbi Aryeh Spiro. And in the midst of the meeting going on, I can't remember who was doing the moderation of that meeting, whoever the moderator was, Aryeh just gets up and we physically embrace one another, and it paused the entire room. Our kindred for this country, our love for this nation. We begin to talk about his book. I want to show it to everyone here. It was called Pushback, and I thought it was such a brilliant title because he really talked in essence, and I recommend everyone go and read this book because he talked about the essence of the Judeo-Christian ethos, my words, but he was talking about, in essence, how to save America, why Israel mattered. And we would go back and forth, often kind of in a celebratory way, commending one another for saying and doing the things. I looked at this guy as a champion because he didn't take back. I always saw him as a form of a general, someone who stood for what he believed in, had no problem articulating what he believed in, and he did it for his love of God as well as the love for this great nation. He and I saw this nation the same, as an exceptional place. We understood the intricate ties to this nation and Israel. We understood how our laws were created from the Mosaic concept of the Torah. And we both shared that passion. I'm going to miss him, but I'm not going to miss the fact that his influence has impacted so many. I guarantee you, once you read his book, read any of his writings, look at any of his videos that are still up, and I'll make them available at aubreyshines.com. Go out and look at them. It will fundamentally challenge you to look at yourself and what you are or not doing as it relates to making sure that we preserve this great union. We're going to miss my friend.